Yun.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Elmer.
Hello.
Sorry about the timing for today.
No problem.
Yeah. And my voice is I lost my voice basically. Yeah. So sorry for the raspiness. Yeah. So I think today maybe you gentlemen must have a lot of questions for me. So I thought if I can clarify as much as I can, that would be the best. Yeah. Who wants to start?
Yeah, maybe I can start, and I discussed this with Bok. So when we spoke last Saturday, Aldrin, we went into more details about the joint venture registering Civica in Singapore, and I've been thinking about it, so I could discuss this with Bok. So maybe you can just walk us through the procedure and what documents. I imagine there are administrative documents, but also planning documents to structure the JV.
So I think the key document is basically the partnership agreement. And the partnership agreement will be the standard template. I can show you now how it will look like. Give me a minute. Yeah, and then once we have the partnership agreement, it's basically to identify what are our responsibilities, or what's the direction of the joint venture, and whether any of us can exit or not, because that's important to know what's our journey together. And once we have this partnership agreement, we can start working out the financial sheet of how we can how we're going to keep this business operational. So I'll just show you some examples. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to share screen if you don't mind, Elmer. Okay, so this example how the pre-incorporation shareholders agreement will look like. So we will list out what exactly we are setting up, who the partners are, and what kind of status the partners will be, and then the share ownership, and then what exactly we are building together, what are we committed to, what are our tasks and responsibilities, and then how we will manage the organization, who shareholders equity is one aspect, but the voting rights is another, who makes the executive decisions, and then in what situation whatever executive decisions will take precedence and what will not. Competition restriction clause, right? It's a standard thing. Buyback options if there's any abnormal exit situation. This is about how do you call that? Basically long-term planning. If one of us gets into an accident or passes away, who has control of the shares? Is it back to the partners or it goes to the next of kin and such? All right, and then if you were to dispose or sell shares, how will the selling of shares be governed? How will determine market value? Because if you were to exit, how do we price the share exit? And in terms of interpretation, which documents are we referring to for interpretation? So if you have some, for example, if Civica already has so many done so many years of write-ups and legal proceedings, we need to list that those take precedence, or this new document would supersede everything, or there'll be future opportunities for us to discuss how each component will be discussed. So this part is important because Civika is already pre-existing. When we do set up this new organization, do we have to discuss everything before we register it, or we just register it first, and in the spirit of the fact that we're doing a joint venture, as we go along, then whatever assets in the past, whatever agreements in the past, how are we going to transfer it to this new entity, who's going to take charge of these executables? All right, and then the usual whereby we have to put disclosures, what's our interest in other businesses. So this is extremely important because we cannot have opportunity where, if we have other businesses that with conflict of interest, we have to be clear. And this is particularly important because in terms of compliance in Singapore, our Singapore government is quite strict when it comes to money laundering. So whatever monies that is earned and how the monies is transferred is very important. So knowing where you get your monies come from, how you fund this organization is important. And when the money is earned by this business, how does the money flow out and where does it flow to? So all this has to be clearly spelled out for us, although it's not required for reporting. And as long as we don't earn more than, I think, 200,000 Singapore dollars a year, there is no need for us to do auditing. So we can actually get by with just internal auditing, but it's good for us to get these processes in place so that, when the time comes, we will not get into problems. So again, disputes. If there are disputes, how do we address them? So usually, again, company registered in Singapore follows Singapore laws. Singapore legal system is slightly different from the Filipino legal system. So Bok, I'm sure you're very familiar with the difference. If you're not, I can happy to share. We use recently our legal system we just changed it to use simple English. So a lot of it can be found online. And everything is based online. And if you need me to explain any more details about our legal processes, very happy to share that with you. Right, and then yeah. So the details will be listed in the different exhibits, right? Then in terms of the profit, how do we share the profits? How do we share the income? How do we allocate the revenue? These are the details which we'll go through, quite standard in that sense. Okay. Is this all right? I can do up a generic one and then we can start filling it up once you are comfortable. So in terms of milestones wise, what we are looking at is on my end, I'm hoping to register TSD Ventures by end of this month. And then when we want to do the registration for Civika, the proposal is for TSDV Singapore to take 30% of Civika. So that will form the 30% Singapore local shareholdings. Okay, when how it looks like will be registration will be done via a portal called Accra. Have you seen Accra before?
Accra is the local law firm.
It's not a law firm. It's our accounting and corporate regulatory authority. Basically, in Singapore, every single process is centralized under this thing called Accra. So when you register a company in Singapore, you have to also register what we call a SingPass, which is our government portal. You'll be based on your mobile phone. And when you have a SingPass, you register this thing called a corporate pass. This corporate pass will give you access to all the corporate services, including Accra, any licenses that you want. If you want any information about shareholdings, it's all there. Okay, so if you want more information about business ownership and details, it's all under the Accra site. It's up to date and accurate. Then later on, when you have fully registered your business, you will gain access to other kinds of services. So let me just show you very briefly how Accra looks like. I'll log in for you to see how it looks like as well. So this is Accra. So as I mentioned, you log into BizFile. So when you log in, you need to have a corporate pass, which is via this app called SingPass. So SingPass is an app. So when you scan or when you click on this, it will trigger a login on the app. right? In this case, I can scan it. And then I'll be logging in through the phone, the usual mumbo jumbo 2FA thing. Yeah. Yes. So once logged in, you have access to all the businesses that you have. So for example, I can focus on let's say Social Collider, right? One of the companies that I have equity in. Okay, so this is my profile. I'm just updating it. Okay, so anything that you need to do is all listed here on the left on the dashboard. So if you want to file anything or launch anything, it's based using this system and platform. Okay, so you can look at e-services. So if you register a private limited company, it's like a LLC. Then if you want to do any filing of information, change registration, close, all services are here. But one key difference is that because there's a foreign ownership, we are unable to register the business on our own using this portal. In order to register a business, we have to use a filing agent to register a foreign entity into it. So I'll be introducing us to this filing agent, or I'll be hiring a filing agent portal for us to do that, right? And then the filing agent will go through the whole process of getting us to register for whatever service, whatever compliance or whatever due diligence, and yeah, everything should be done within 1 to 2 weeks for us to successfully register the company. Okay. Yeah, and you can see once you are registered, all the services are here. Okay, so this is just the basic registration of licenses. The full services is from another portal. Let's see. This is the key portal where we have access to every service available. Again, same thing, login through SingPass. Okay, so this is where we assign access to services for all that you require for the entity. And over here, you have 30 pages of different kinds of services that the Singapore government has, everything related to the business, from training to employer relations, to grants to funding. Okay, so this is all the corporate services. So that's how you look like when you run and manage a company. It's transparent. So basically, you have access to all the details.
Yeah. So assume, for example, we had already registered Civika Singapore,
Yeah.
and then we find a partner who wants to get a license or a franchise for Civika University in Indonesia. Maybe some benefactor says, "Okay, I'll throw in a few million US dollars. Can you please start up an operation in Jakarta?" How would that flow through this entity and also Sky? If Sky were the entity representing, yeah, Civica.
Okay, so if you want to register a company in Indonesia, we will use this portal called ESG, Enterprise Singapore. Okay, so firstly, Sky is not an entity. Sky is just an opens and commons platform. So we usually use Sky to open doors and then run the Sky Hub, run the programs, and gain trust. once people trust and we gain connections, if we use it to find a prospect, if the prospect wants to invest in Civika Indonesia, so the first thing we will do is to use a grant. There's a particular grant. Okay, so under this portal I mentioned before, right, you can have a look. There are many different support services for us to go overseas. So for us, if you want to grow overseas, you'll be under this thing called growth and transformation. All right, so to help us to grow, you see there's this thing called the Singapore Global Enterprises Initiative, whereby you can work with partners. Some are funded to prepare your business for their franchising and licensing process. So you can usually link up with various organizations. So for example, there's this particular program whereby you can hire interns, 70% funded interns for up to 3 to 6 months, called the Global Readiness Talent. And under this Global Readiness Talent, this intern actually, you can be used to deploy overseas if you want to. You just need to pay for his fees. There's also this program called the MRA grant, called the market. So under here, market entry support. So besides building your internal capabilities, you can also use funding to grow overseas. So this MRA grant, right, is here. The Singapore provides a cashback up to 100,000 Singapore dollars per market. So every country that we want to grow, we can take a 50% cashback up to 100,000. That means we have to spend 200,000 first. And what they do is we can cover 20,000, 50,000, 30,000 for all kinds of overseas market activities. So one thing I can do is once we are registered, I can connect us to an advisor. Every company in Singapore is attached to a business advisor. The business advisor actually guides us through this whole grant application process. Later, I show you how these grants are applied for. Okay, so the MRA grant is just only one overseas market support. There's also this thing called the double tax deduction. So in fact, a lot of companies, let's say if you have a company in Philippines, you invest in a company in Singapore, it is sometimes wiser to use the Singapore company to go back into the Philippines so that you are not taxed double. So the tax in Singapore is lower than the Philippines. And there's also a lot of free trade agreements that allows us to bypass a lot of additional costs. So that's one of these things that we can look at. And again, you have to study this. When you speak to the advisor will give us more information. I'm going to show you how the grants look like. So in order to see, because there's so many support systems, to experience this, it is really better to find a business consultant. And it's free. It's paid for by the Singapore government. Based on your business plans, they will advise you what grants you should go for. But if you feel like doing it on your own, you can also explore the portal.
So once we register, we're gonna get our pass.
Yes. Then you can get a SingPass, and then you can access all of these different portals. And you can see there are all kinds of grants that you can apply for. So depending on what sector, which area, which focus, you can narrow it down. So let's say if Civika needs, let's say, education, training and adult education, then bring my business overseas to establish a stronger international presence. All right. Then it tells you straight away which grants are relevant. So just now I mentioned the Market Readiness Assistance Grant. Now there's another grant called the Market Access and Development Grant. And then all the information about the grant is here. It's part of the Enterprise Development Grant. Right. And then, yeah. So, yep, that's it. So all the details are here. So to submit for a grant, these are all the steps you need to take. And really, we can spend a lot of time just applying for grants. And as long as the grant is approved, let's just go. Yeah.
And then to operate in Indonesia, we would use the Singapore entity.
Yes, because you can see we can actually get grants for airfare, for office space rental, for hiring staff overseas, right? For buying hardware, for buying materials, all these things we can actually subsidize our global expansion if you use the Singapore company.
And what category of entity would we register in Singapore?
So any entity will do. Private limited is preferable. Most important is that there must be 30% Singapore shareholding, number one. Number two, your company must not earn more than 100 million a year, nor hire 2,000 or hire more than 200 staff. If you earn more than 100 million a year or have more than 200 staff, there are other kinds of grants that are available. Again, these portals will identify which are relevant to you, and then they would guide you through that process.
And TSDV, as a JV partner, what what did you have in mind in terms of TSDV's value that that TSDV would bring to the table?
So the key value is TSDV itself is a venture builder. So connection to funds, that's one. Not these grants, as in investors' funds, because it benefits us to get investors to invest in Civika if we are a shareholder, number one. Number two, TSDV itself is setting up shop in a few countries. So you already have your own ground presence, and we can work together hand in hand, all right, for us to grow. Right. And lastly, one thing we want to do that has value is this thing called share swap. So there are two other entities that we intend to do a share swap with. One is TSDV Philippines. If you guys can come aboard and be shareholders of TSDV Philippines, it helps us as well, because whenever we grow, you can help us to expand. Another entity that I would like us to do share swap with is TCF Learn, because TCF Learn is about placemaking for education. So since Civika is already running at university, when TCF Learn comes in to do also the other aspects of learning, mentoring, coaching, or like K-12 schools, it's part of a larger ecosystem anyway.
And the share swap would be over and above the first 30%.
So share swap would be if TSD takes 30% of Civika, then for TSDV Philippines, Civika could, same thing, right? Mutual could take 30% of TSDV in the Philippines. So our growth is mutually, ensured.
And TCF Learn.
So same thing. If TCF Learn or when TCF Learn is going to be registered, it'll be good if you guys come in to take a seat on TCF Learn. But in terms of percentage wise, we're not sure yet, because TCF Learn is operating a slightly different model. We're not doing shareholdings. We're registering TCF Learn as an LLP instead, more like a holdings company.
And what about so Civika has different labs, and the labs, the idea is for the labs to produce some IP. In fact, just the other day, our Bamboo Impact Lab, although that's not Civika owned, but I have equity in that company, and Bok is also involved in that. But we have something that looks like it's going to be patentable, and then we also won a 1 million peso prize with ANEP, right? So we expect some of the labs to start producing intellectual property, patents, patentable, licensable IP in the different campuses in the different countries. How would we manage it? The intention is to grow that pipeline, and some of it will be patentable and licensable.
It's preferable to to see Civika Singapore as a holdings company, to own a stake in whichever labs you have, or if all the labs itself could come under Civika Singapore, and then from then on treat that as incubatees, right? That once funding comes in, it spins off. And the reason why you want Civika SG to hold equity is because we're going to run it like a MNC, like a corporate. So we will, as an MNC model of management, manage all the IPs that you have centrally. If we don't follow this holdings company central level of management, then we can also see these labs as a separate spin-off with no direct correlation, but just a partnership model. So under the social labs kind of framework, you have some of it are spin-offs, some of it are direct subsidiaries, some of them are just partnerships.
Well, right now the labs are structurally the labs. The only registered entity in the Philippines is Civica, and then we have registered also in the U.S. In New York and in Delaware. So there are two entities in the U.S. And at conceptually, all of the labs are being operated by Civica. So there we have for some we have registered the brand name or trade name in the Philippines, but not all. And so far, to keep things simple, at least in terms of entities, we've managed all of these labs under one entity. So it's the only entity that represents the labs is Civica.
So the best is actually to do an M&A consolidation and then run from the direct branch of Civica. Another way we can do is the ecosystem approach. You can see Civica as one brand, and you can see the social labs as another brand. Then either the holdings company owns both brands, or if Civica is one brand and the social labs another brand, then you see as an ecosystem. The social labs are registered in the US. Civica University maybe is registered in Singapore, all right, and then maybe another entity, right, was registered in the Philippines. And these three separate entities do joint ventures to operate a university, let's say, in another country. And this university will be a joint venture of these three brands with three different investors and such. That's also possible. Of course, it's easier if all managed from a centralized entity or centralized holdings, but if you can't do that due to investor kind of restrictions, then we have to do manually this kind of strategic partnerships, which also is an advantage because then the social labs, if it's not bound only to Civica, can also be sold or can be repackaged into other forms with other entities. That's also possible if you are able to manage this whole portfolio.
So the contract will be between Civica and TSD. Is that
so? If it's going to be a joint venture in Singapore, then you'll be TSD and TSD Ventures and Civica.
TSD Ventures in Singapore.
In Singapore,
right? And then we'd organize a board for Civica, and TSD would have at least one seat, right? Depending on how
depends on what Civica needs from us. So what kind of support you require. So I can tell you outright who will be available to you. Roy Lai will be one of the persons available to you. He will be representing TCF Learn. And Roy is very much entrenched in the whole L&D space. You find that his access to him will be very helpful. Then, of course, you will have Daryl as well with TTA, which makes this partnership easy. And then myself, which represents TSD itself. So we can be there as advisors. We could hold a C-suite role, or we could hold a board member voting role. It's all up to you. And it all depends on us as well. Again, how we butter, the relationship. So the good thing about TSD Ventures, because it's an LLP, it's run like a lawyer's firm. So only the representatives that are involved with each project will be liable or have access to whatever services. It doesn't affect the rest of our portfolio.
So so the Civica entity in Singapore will function primarily as a holdings company. Is that right? How would I manage in a sense, the academic, the office of the provost and stuff, the programming and the labs and the pipeline of startups or incubators under the labs?
I propose that Civika Singapore will be the headquarters. So the reason why we hold 30% equity besides the grants is because, but 30% also represents administrative costs. So we will be managing the entire administrative requirements for all the Civica kind of components. So we will have an ERP. If your ERP is going to be based on a particular system, the last time we discussed, it was supposed to be based on Udo.
Odoo, yeah.
Udo. Then we will be managing Udo from Singapore and the subsidiaries from the Singapore managed Udo. All the websites, marketing, we can also centralize managed by the Singapore company or centrally managed, but then the actual updating and the reporting could be outsourced to the other units. Again, we will operate it like a MNC model. So I'll divide the organization into executive, operations. Operations will be your HR, finance, admin, the standard things, followed by business development, right? And then the business units. And business units themselves can be centrally managed in Singapore, but they can be, based in other countries.
When
So,
you say centrally managed, you mean administratively
Yes.
the Singapore entity is
That's right.
interfacing, right? But
but the director for, let's say, a business unit, let's say the business unit is called Social Labs. Your director for Social Labs could be based in the US, right? But the administrative and the security and the documents are all managed within Singapore itself.
yeah, and when you say that managed from Singapore, well, I used to work with multinational NGO, and we were registered in the US and also in India, and then also in the Philippines. And the functional backroom was in India, so that's where the bookkeeping. They also had lots of researchers there. When you say managed from Singapore, is that the individuals physically in Singapore doing work?
No, which means that the corporate headquarters is
Right.
regarded as in Singapore.
Right.
Then the staff could be outsourced to, a department or to a company itself in India itself. So that's how a lot of MNCs operate in Singapore. They just register a HQ, and then they will just say that their business is now based in Singapore, but everything else, factories, admin staff, they're all around the world. So that's how most businesses operate in Singapore. Only the small SMEs that are for local markets everything is here.
So, for example, we had somebody working from Jakarta under the Singapore office. Then administratively, he has a project contract with the Singapore office, and whatever tax obligations are computed through the Singapore office. Is that how
Okay,
it
so
works?
so in Jakarta or in Indonesia, all transactions have to be billed to a local company. So it's either Civika registers Civika Indonesia, then Civika Indonesia will be the billing agency. And because it's a subsidiary, again, we need to identify how do we want to do the distribution node. If it's going to be a franchise model, what is the franchising model like? And whether we pay the Singapore headquarters what franchise fees. But that's how it should be, basically. And then we pay the salaries of the staff below. And then maybe any surplus profit can also go back to Singapore, all right, as part of the fund management as a centralized funds. Or if you're not intending to register Civica Indonesia, one possibility is you could work with a partner locally to bill, and this partner will just pay Civica Singapore as a for the project fees.
Right.
So a project management company in Indonesia, and then Civica becomes one of the vendors or the suppliers of the services for this project management company in Indonesia. So currently TSDV has a partner in Indonesia called MHF. We could use TSDV's partnerships to do that already without needing Civica to come in.
Mhm. And if there were licensing arrangements, would say Indonesia licensee was interested, they would enter into a licensing agreement with Civica Singapore?
So if there's a licensing agreement, again, it is better to have a billing company in Indonesia. If you license direct from Singapore, if anything goes wrong, legally it's going to be a problem. So you usually partner with a local partner. So in this case, you can partner MHF. MHF will, on behalf of a licensing agent, on behalf of Civika Singapore, would issue the contractual license to the Indonesia entity. So these two are the ones that will be legally bound. And of course, you have to trust MHF to deliver the value, of which is fine because we do have a stake in it.
Okay.
How soon can you send over the template?
I'm sorry, the partnership template?
Yeah. Partnership document.
Okay. I'm urgently trying to do the pitch deck first for the fund. In fact, you have questions for me, please ask. So if you give me by next weekend, I can give you a rough partnership template.
Yeah. And if you have a blank template, right, that just has the pro forma elements, then we can start studying that, right? We can start
Okay.
filling out our side.
Yeah, okay, I can do that. Yeah.
Okay. Bok, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I'm want to get started on because Aldrin has a deadline, I think, with the agent.
Yeah.
So get into a couple of ideas.
So interestingly, there are a couple of agents out there right now looking to invest in impact projects, and they're not asking for returns, just asking for pure impact reporting. It is due to some of the funds that the investment funds, for tax breaks, they need to invest at least 10% of their funds into these. So that's what's happening. This particular agent that I'm talking to is actually a law firm. I'm just going to give them a very generic proposal without any details. Then if he's okay with it, he and I will sign an NDA. Then he will reveal to me the fund itself and what the fund is looking for. Then I will come back to you guys again to look for more specific details based on what the fund requires. And usually the fund application process lasts between 6 months to 1 year. I'm not so I don't think we are ready to actually receive so much money, but it's good to get started because eventually we will be applying for these kinds of funds. So I'm intending to apply in two flavors. One for Sky overall. I'm going to ask about 300 million euros. I just anyhow just try, and then all our hub and our verticals, I'll just put in some figures. But our individual hubs, our individual center of excellences, I'm going to ask for 100 mil each. Like Center of Learning, Center of Lifelong Learning, 100 mil. Civika University, 100 mil. Co-Creation Labs, 100 mil. But Co-Creation Labs, I'm going to park it under DT Foundation. DT Foundation, 100 mil, so on and so forth. Just to see what the feedback is. Again, we'll never know. One of these corporate funds, if they like you, that's it. You're funded for life. But the one big catch is that you might have to represent their brand. So this is something that we have to discuss as we go along. So let me just pass the first round first and see whether I can ever get through the first round.
Yeah, so you have everything from our end?
Not yet, actually. I got a Civika site, but it'll be good if you give me some photographs, a list of for past projects, some traction, some impact metrics like how many people have gone through your programs, how many projects successfully funded, that kind of data sets will be good.
For Gertie and I have touched base basically, and we're partnering up on this on the 80 hand plug project specifically, but that's gonna expand to basically that can come under ACHC, but that's a big chunk. So Gertie has allowed me to tag in her name because she's got the whole background for this thing. So basically, it's a integrated ecotourism developed based on the only volcanic plug in the country, I think. So that's what we're positioning. But the whole thing will basically spill over to hold what Guardia and I are also doing here in Bohol, basically setting up very similar to what you're doing in Bicol.
Okay, so we can actually ask for 3 types of funds. Okay, ACHC itself actually has a product that we have already developed. That product is called the Intercultural Center. I'll show it to you now. How it looks like. For CSIV as well has a particular product. We've already sought funding for it, and so far we are successful for the second round. And they're just asking us to give a POC before we proceed forward. And the Blue Economy Labs and such is going to be part of this CSIV fund. Then the third way we can get funding is via the futures projects, whereby each futures project itself, we can apply for a separate fund. So see it in 3 different ways. So whatever company that you have to work from or work with can actually be involved in, in these 3 different ways. Okay, so I'm going to show you what ACHC's outcome is. Okay, this is our ACHC proposal. It's for a Center of Excellence for Arts, Culture, Heritage, and Creatives. So this is the same project that we approached the City of Manila, and the city planner has agreed to, in principle, that when they build they are currently refurbishing a building. They will actually reserve the building for us to manage, right? Under this ACHC. So this proposal is developed by the former executive director of the Singapore Center for Design, and it's quite well developed. So this possibly could be $100 million project to set up these kinds of buildings, these kind of programs in the various countries that Sky is operating in. So this is the outcome of ACHC. Besides ACHC, and again, the end goal for CSIV is this. Because the whole idea is, as much as we want to do carbon credits or we want to do sustainable energy, our theory of change is that we want to do projects that last for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And we don't want projects that are sexy. We want to look at the risk, and we want to make sure that our operating model lasts all the way to that 10, 20, 25 year scale. So in order to do that, we have already developed this solution, which is a holistic solution from a foundation, developing capabilities on the ground, and it has to be localized capabilities. Localized capabilities in the field of being able to organize community involvement, to do reforestation and eco projects, right? To be able to do simple biological measurements, transects, all right? Managing the flora and fauna of the space, of environmental protection measurements. So we need to build all these capabilities on the ground. Without it, usually when an expert comes in, after 2 years, he leaves and that's it. The ground is left naked. Or if the expert comes in from overseas, and if someone pays the expert more money, you find that this expert will not be working for the benefit of the local location. So we need to build localized expertise. And that's where the Sky Hubs comes in. When we partner with the Sky Hubs becomes the placemaking a hub for us to plug in all these experts, do a knowledge transfer to the students, to the lecturers, all right? Or even develop whole new faculties with the universities. And then these universities will now take care of this aspect of the ground. So that's the green color portion. And this purple color portion, to ensure that there is value that is generated over long periods of time, we cannot practice mono economic practice. We cannot have the entire location earning money using one business, because that's not resilient. So our project example is in the case of Indonesia, where we had entire sites practicing this mono economic practice. After that particular economic value is no longer there, and the investors leave, it leaves behind this huge gap that the people had to deal with. Environmental disaster, no longer any more economic opportunities and such. So in order to ensure that the local economic growth continues sustainably for the next 5-7 years at least, we are invoking the the incubator accelerator model of startups, that we want to raise a fund and support local businesses. So although we are earning extra money from carbon credits or what have you, local businesses can still be supported and take part in and grow sustainable kind of income opportunities. So when you talk about having an eco-tourism resort, again, rather than just plugging one eco-tourist resort into the thing and hope that this eco-tourism resort will pay everyone's salaries, to minimize the risk of dependencies, we plug in this eco-resort as only one of the economic activities. And again, to support this eco-resort, rather than hiring staff, we want to support local businesses. So to support this eco-tourism resort, maybe you can train a group of local guides, a group of local translators, set up a company, do a partnership with this resort, local boating agents, right? Local B&Bs perhaps to take part in the resort, so that again the economy becomes more interrelational and more resilient over time. So that's the whole idea behind the CSIV. So every localized region, we have to adjust it differently, but the general idea is this, right? Long term, not just single solution plug in and that's it. Hope this single solution works.
Yeah.
So this is CSIV. Yep.
We go back to the slide. Actually, this is what I was. The first time I saw this, actually, the first meeting we had, we just saw that. But
Yep.
it got more fleshed out as the more we met, and especially since I've moved here the past 2 months, especially the building solutions, right? So like the mangroves we're looking at here in Batasan, they do need better building material, something that can easily be rebuilt after every typhoon, because they still rely on the old materials. What if we just send out inflatable tents or something like that?
So the fortunate thing is that we have a lot of partners in this space.
Yeah.
Elmer, you remember Jessa? They
Mhm.
introduced me. Jessa introduced me to her CEO, and her CEO and Jessa, her company, is doing a bamboo, growing bamboo in Kamsur in Biko.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that.
Exactly. And interestingly, our project in Indonesia has a problem. Because many of the coastal settlements had investments from overseas to set up fish farms, and because of the influx of money, they abandoned traditional infrastructure and built concrete homes. And the concrete homes are based on land-based designs, so it's like a slab and then a house on the slab, not realizing that over time it starts to sink or it starts to tilt. And because they've cleared all the land of bamboo, they can't go back to traditional building materials. So they are having a massive disaster in so many levels. So just nice Indonesia needs this bamboo, and if we develop the technology of growing, and we find that Philippines now will be the IP providers for our location in Indonesia. So and one interesting thing also about Jessa is her CEO. The CEO's father used to be the president of YMCA. And he was telling me that YMCA also works closely with Singapore's YMCA. And interestingly, my classmate just became the CEO of YMCA Singapore. So the correlation is directly there. Then we can partner together. So everything will come together. So what I'm hoping to form is a CSIV committee, a big one that spans across countries, maybe a local one within Philippines, before going through the different regions. And then in each region, you have a sub-project, right? You have your fisheries project, your construction projects, your your carbon projects. So when we talk about the Blue Economy Lab, I feel that it's one step before the CSIV villages. Without the Blue Economy Lab, we don't have the manpower or the ability to execute the CSIV project. Now, what CSIV really does is just coordinating and getting money in. So CSIV will be one of the 100 mil that I'm going to ask for, and we're going to start in these locations.
Yeah, especially
Yes.
Yeah, the mention about education. Yeah, that's a big it's a big it's a big concern in island communities. There here there's like 6 different schools located in islands, and it's so expensive for students to get to those schools. So even the thing that you mentioned, floating schools, that makes a lot of sense here. Uh, that's
So interestingly, just a few days back, I spoke to the scouts. There's this World Scouting program,
Mm.
and we're in talks now. If it's successful, we might create a scouting project and get the scouts to build the floating classrooms. Knots and
So Bok,
lashes.
basically we can set up the Blue Economy Labs in Bohol so that that progression of initiatives start building upon each other, right?
So
Yeah,
the Blue Economy Lab will be in every Sky Hub where we are doing the
Yeah.
CSIV. It has to exist, and it has to funnel all the people into the CSIV. Then CSIV hopefully will fund the Blue Economy Lab.
yeah. Same thing actually for the ACHC, for instance. So it's like we have this. It could be costly, or it could not be too costly. But we're already thinking right away. The group that I've organized here, Aldrin is met one of them, Nigel. We just thinking like we should set up a non-profit, right? We just to do a BOT with the LGU, because the LGU is not equipped to develop these kinds of projects. It's a one man per department affair.
So I would recommend that this project will be the Bohol Futures project.
Okay,
You can set up a Bohol Futures non-profit that does everything.
right.
Or
Okay.
another way is when we do set up TSD Ventures Philippines, you can use TSD Ventures Philippines to be the non-profit to drive it.
Mhm.
Or if it's going to be arts focused only, you have access to the Art Life and Co brand or the
Right.
Community Arts Network brand. And when you use these international brands rather than starting from scratch, you already have traction that you can use to get funds.
Right.
So if it is completely local, I recommend setting up Bohol Futures company.
Company. Okay, as a registered company.
Yes. Then
Right.
at least you'll be a localized kind of owner. But in terms of IP, it's good to use the already developed IP so that it's easier.
Gonna bring this under Civica SG, right? So Bohol Futures will be one of the subsidiaries,
Um,
right?
you can do
How
that.
would-
You can do that.
Right. Okay. Right.
But I would recommend that we do a multi-stakeholder partnership for the futures projects.
Yeah.
And actually, the futures projects is actually a 3-party currently. It's actually Civica, DTA, and TSD. So TSD and DTA has already signed an agreement. We just haven't onboard Civica yet. So once Civica is registered in Singapore, we'll onboard as the 3-party, and we will co-run this futures projects.
Okay. So what you're saying, right away from the get-go, the 3 Civica DT, TSD can also become like stockholders of Bohol Futures.
So what we recommend is Bohol stakeholders should hold a larger percentage,
Right.
right? At least 70%, at least.
Yeah.
30% could be a 3-party kind of
Okay.
co-ownership. And because we are using IP and using this IP to own multiple units everywhere.
Okay, makes sense. Same with and then same with the Blue Economy. Will be under so if it looks like it's gonna take off here, like for instance, some guys will start building boats for floating schools, and some guys would actually want to set up a blue carbon ink. So that's another spin-off, will follow the same ratio.
So for the Blue Economy, it's either we do an M&A or we do a partnership. So earlier on, I mentioned a partnership whereby Blue Economy goes first with the Sky Hub and just run the projects. And then when CSIV finally comes to the location, we just funnel whatever you have done into CSIV. CSIV will apply for the fund, and then we go.
Okay.
Or Blue Economy Lab could run the CSIV project itself. So maybe I change the name from CSIV to Blue Economy.
Okay.
Or Blue Economy could be one of the stakeholders or shareholders of CSIV. Maybe Blue Economy Lab could own the green color part of my presentation. That means all the impact part, not the startup part.
Right.
So what I'm talking about is a lot of multiple cross ownerships.
Yeah.
Civika owning Blue Economy owning part of CSIV, and then whenever CSIV goes, Blue Economy goes with it. That's
the
a
fun
better
part.
arrangement.
So Bok, how does this play out? So I imagine, for example, in Bohol, no, and then there's say a blue carbon project in Bohol, and therefore we'd need to enter into contracts locally, including with the LGU, right? And then maybe the local university. So either so that can be a multi-stakeholder, multi-party contract locally, uh,
So
including one of the vehicles that we'll be using.
So I will look at it in terms of current, transition, followed by final model. If we can register CSIV immediately, then straight away CSIV facilitates everything. And CSIV will be a separate entity. But so that could be the end goal. Currently, without waiting for CSIV, DTA, and all that to get ready, straight away, Civika should be doing it and just creating traction. Because once you have traction, when CSIV finally comes in, then it's easier for us to get the funding as well. So like I mentioned, CSIV already has access to the funds. We just need traction. So the 2.5 million I mentioned before, it was based on the project in Indonesia. But if Bohol starts first, the Blue Economy is ready, then we will use and ask whether they could fund the Bohol project first. That could be it too.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the Blue Economy Lab, it can function like basically licensing out the lab to the university, right? But for specific, for blue carbon, where partners will have to enter into a 10-year agreement, then we'd need to structure something, right? Contracts with some entities, including some of the entities that we will be controlling or influencing.
So it depends. If we see, it depends on what exactly Blue Economy Lab is. Is it IP? Is it a program? Or is it an organization, an entity its own? Because you may choose to spin off Blue Economy Lab separate from Civika if you have an investor. And then as a separate entity, it itself can sign agreements on the ground. But bear in mind, where do you register this entity? If you register this entity in the Philippines, what if there's another Blue Economy Lab in, let's say, South Africa? Then does this mean that the headquarters of Blue Economy Lab is Philippines, not Singapore? So many different configurations.
That was my suggestion actually to Elmer. We set up right away the B Lab Incorporated, and so we start. That could be the vehicle for because remember when we talked with Wei Long, he's looking for a entity that's going to hold the carbon credits. So that could be that entity, and we just go into BOTs with LGUs.
But that's the problem that I want to share, because Wei Long is not aware of the bigger picture.
Okay.
Well, if you register, let's say, Blue Economy Lab first in, let's say, Bohol. And then when I want to get an investor funding, and investor funding is in Singapore, let's say 100 mil fund for Blue Economy Labs. Then are we funding Blue Economy Lab in Bohol? Are we funding Blue Economy Lab in Singapore? Can we fund 100 million in Bohol? It's usually not possible.
That's too much, yeah.
Yeah, usually the fund has to be based in Singapore, but the IP is owned by Bohol. Then you find the funder will be uncomfortable because, what if legal, there's any legal issues, how do we rectify it? Right. So that's why I always see that try to use Singapore as the base for everything first before registering something overseas, so that investors feel more comfortable that, the ownership is all based here, funds are here as well. Anything happens legally, we can solve it from Singapore. But if you start something elsewhere first, and then when funds come in, we can't fund that because there's too much dissonance.
Right. what I was thinking, that could happen like that could happen simultaneously, right? At the same time, you could set up, but you're not, you're not. I'm just thinking the local company would be the one, like, you'll be talking to the council, they go talking to the stakeholders, and they just, oh, it's the word is na to,
So
right?
what we do is we usually find a local partner, a
Right.
managing company, and then the IP is still owned by Civika
Yeah.
in Singapore, but you are partnering a vendor who will manage the project for you in Bohol. So in that way, it's a managing partner, it's fine. Whether you own the company or not, that's besides the point.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. So that's another track. We could
That
find
would be a better way to have a managing company, because again, legally, anything happens, everyone feels more comfortable, right? The sense of accountability is there.
Yeah. Okay.
So it'd be good if we can register everything from Singapore, register CSIV, register Bitcoin, but that takes too long and we want to move first. So it's better to just do through partnerships with a local company. Once we are very sure that this is successful, then we can do all the retroactive registrations down the line.
Yeah. Good thing we're starting to find good people here. Elmer led me to Linda. Maybe Linda can find companies for us. Right.
So yeah, so Bok, when you and I were chatting about registering, you had in mind a Philippine registered entity, or were you already thinking of it as a Singapore entity?
Yeah, SG. Yeah. Blue
Okay.
Economy Inc. SG.
But if we worked on Civika SG, then that can be the entity that manages this Blue Economy lab portfolio until we decide to spin it off.
Blue Economy SG, you register Civika SG. Civika SG owns a brand called Blue Economy. IP is 100% owned or what have you. And then only when and you can do anything you want with Blue Economy. And when you're ready to register it, then you register. Usually you register when funds come in or when investors come in. Then you spin off a separate entity. But otherwise, everything can be managed directly using Civika Singapore.
Okay. That works. Because that was before we had this meeting.
Yep. Okay.
So what do you need from us, Aldrin, before your past projects?
I need your past projects, traction, examples, photographs, just a few here and there. And anyway, it's good to start compiling. In fact, once you have done these things, I'm going to add these things to the Sky website as well. And you should be adding this into the Civika websites too.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's just force ourselves to do it properly, because if not, we never move.
A meeting with Linda, 3 of us, just the
Okay.
Zoom.
Sige.
I like her.
Okay, that's good. Okay then.
All
no
right.
more questions.
Yes.
Yeah, and then Aldrin, I'll be in Singapore 2 weeks from now, so I hope to catch some of you.
Let's plan something, because
Yep.
in Jakarta as well.
Yep.
And Bok, please come too.
Where?
Singapore.
I have to fix a lot of things here, but
Understand.
Yeah, sooner or later. Yeah.
Sooner or later. Or I have to go over anyway, sooner or later.
yeah, we gonna need some scientists for this thing. The carbon thing is really, taking shape.
Wonderful. Good to hear that. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
thank you guys.
Have a good weekend.
Sure.
Oh,
Same
Bok,
to
can
you.
you stay back for a few more minutes?
Okay.
Okay.